Your thoughts about this
emotional
emotional
time? Yeah, and I think it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that we don't have our first woman president, because I do believe that women have a greater love of life. They cherish life more than men do in a weird way. They're not as easily willing to throw it away. And I think it would have been very good for this country to have the first woman president.
You and I don't know what it's like to have a human being come out of us. That's quite an experience to have a baby.
That's right. And we also don't know what it's like to have a human being growing inside of us and nurturing a human being. And I think, you know, unfortunately, we've got a situation where, you know, we've got a misogynist, you know, in the White House. We've got a racist who's also anti-Semitic. And I know people don't like to, you know, hear those terms thrown around. Is he really anti-Semitic? Where did you pick that up? Well, yeah. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. Because it doesn't matter whether you are discriminating against a black person or a Muslim or a Latino or a Jew. If you are comfortable with the fact that there are groups who hate Muslims, hate Jews, hate Latinos, hate women, if you are comfortable with having those groups support you and you don't in a forceful way say, this is not part of who I am, then you are basically the Jewish police at the Warsaw Ghetto. You're condoning it. And I've never heard Donald Trump ever say that he was against any of those groups that are supporting him.
Well, let's talk about the complexity of that, because I don't want to say the old, some of my best friends are, any of that stuff, but his son-in-law is very observant. He's Jewish, and his daughter has converted, as, you know, looks to be his favorite daughter, perhaps. So that's all happening around him. He's also, you know, I get the feeling that he's going to be very pro-Israeli. I don't know if that clicks with you or not, coincides with your thinking about it, but I think he's more complicated than this. I mean, he's talking about picking, you know, some of these guys he's talking about picking.
I go back to the Jewish police at the Warsaw Ghetto. Yes, there are Jews that were fine with, you know, said it's all going to be okay. You know, they will march through Germany. It's going to be fine. There are people like that, and there are people who have economic interests that don't have anything to do with holding up certain moral interests. Now, look at what's happened in this country, and you've talked about it. I've heard you talk about it, Chris. You have. You know, you had the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Loving versus Virginia in 1967, and things were moving in a very good direction. It was difficult, but it was moving in a good direction. Then you had in the 70s with All in the Family, we shone a light on racism. Then you had the 80s and 90s, and you had stars on television, Oprah Winfrey. You had stars in TV and movies, and culminating with the first African-American president. And at that point, I think what we didn't understand is that racism that exists in our country, which had been submerged all of a sudden through Donald Trump and giving a megaphone, starting with the birther issue, unearthed all of this racism that has bubbled to the surface. And it's very disturbing to think that the first African-American president is followed by someone who's supported by the Ku Klux Klan. Very, very disturbing. But in a way, I understand it, because we're fighting the last battle of the Civil War. It's the white nationalists hanging on for dear life and threatened by the idea that the country is moving away from them and it's becoming more diverse. And that's what we're talking about here. So, you know, we can't sugarcoat this. This is really, really rough stuff. But we do move forward, and sometimes you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's not a straight line. And this, in a way, I think has shown America where we are and what racism pervades underneath. And hopefully this will move us forward in the future.
Well, it is a dialectic. I completely agree with you. And I've given a speech like that to an African-American newspaper in Philly one time years ago. And I do believe it's a war. And a war goes on. It goes back to the Civil War, to the know-nothings, all the way through the suffragette movement. There's always this left versus right. It's not that neat, but it is a battle about values and who we are.